Okay, so now we're going to talk about playblasting and also talk about how to make your playblasts go from gross gray looking Lamberts to something that looks pretty nice and appealing, all using Maya's viewport. The reason that you would want to make it look good is because the whole point of layout is to take an idea and conceptualize it from a 2D storyboard into as close as a 3D render as possible. And a lot of people, when they're doing layout for the first time, I don't blame them. They just throw in a bunch of squares, a bunch of white boxing, and they don't color anything. And that is really hard for people to understand the whole idea of your story and what you actually want the final rendered product to look like. And that's a lot of what layout does is they'll create 3D animatics and they'll make them look as beautiful as they can with the tools that they have. So let's go ahead and do that for this one. A lot of what it comes down to is these buttons up here. These buttons give you a lot of flexibility and will definitely enhance the look of how it looks in your viewport. I'm just going to turn off this really quick. And yeah, and you can probably already see by the things I'm turning off, like what exactly I'm gonna do. But usually when you have a scene, it kind of looks like this. You have nerve curves going everywhere. Um, at least for me in this scene, that's what's happening. This car is coming like that, and there's a bunch of cops chasing it. So in order to get rid of that, you go to show. If I pressed all, you would see all of these nerve curves and they're gross. I don't want to see those. So we're going to go to show, none. And so now you don't see anything and you're just going to do show polygons because at the end of the day, that's all we want to see is the polygons. Cool. Now we get to get into some of the fun parts, which is up here. These three I usually always have on for Playblast. It's this little circle with the shadow under it, the circle with like a little motion to it, and then this weird looking guy. So let's go through these. This one is ambient occlusion. So you'll notice when I press this, all it does is it adds little shadows into crevices where polygons are intersecting each other. So that just helps differentiate whenever like a lot of objects are close in a scene, close to one another. It helps like give a little bit of like spacing between them, especially when your scene is all gray Lamberts. The second one is motion blur. So whenever you have motion blur on and nothing's happening, you get some really weird artifacts like what's happening here. But if I were to press play, you can definitely tell a difference with this motion blur. When I turn it off, you can definitely see it is not as blurry. Next one is anti-aliasing. So we'll see if this one works. Sometimes it's really hard to see, especially if this video comes out compressed. But what it does is you can, wherever there's like a really sharp line, Maya will sometimes create little black artifacts around those really sharp lines. You can see them up here. I think you can kind of see them right here. But once you do that, that'll take all of those black artifacts and smooth them out to create nice crisp lines that don't look super computerized or weird or anything like that. The next thing that I usually do is I throw in a directional light. So if you do this, if you go up to create lights, you get a whole bunch of lights up here. And if you do a directional light, that creates light everywhere in your scene. And I usually do a few of them at different intensities. And so if I turn this on, this will turn on all the lights I have in my scene. And let's see if I go over here, this is what they look like. And if I rotate these around, you can see it actually lights up my scene differently. So you can get like kind of like a fill light going. And then I use another one for just like some extra, like, I don't know, bounce light, just to add a little bit more dimensionality to it. So the light isn't super harsh and flat. But I'm going to undo what I just did there. So lighting it is always great, and it's super easy. Like you just throw in a couple directional lights, move them around, change the color, change the intensity till you get what you like. Now, something that I think really helps scenes, even if it's just a little bit, is adding in hardware fog. You can do this by going to shading, pressing this box here, and then you'll go under this hardware fog tab, and you have these different types of fall off. Honestly, I just use the linear one. Let me actually turn it on first before I start talking about it. Boom. So as you can see, it just creates some volumetric fog, and it's not hard at all on your scene. It runs perfectly fine. You would think that it would make your scene really slow, but it doesn't. Ambient occlusion will make your scene pretty slow sometimes. and motion blur too, but hardware fog usually works just fine. And it usually just adds a lot, especially when you have something close up in your foreground and you just want to focus on that and not focus on things in the background. That usually adds a lot. Let me move this back to the scene over here. And so you can already just see a difference between like how flat and gray this whole world looks compared to over here. And then speaking of making things not apparent in the background, you can add depth of field by also doing shading and adding depth of field. However, if you are new to Maya and new to doing this whole layout thing, I would not recommend doing depth of field in your layout because Maya's depth of field, and to get to your depth of field settings, it's just on this right side here. I'll go over a video. I'll do a video of that later, but you can also turn it on and off here. I do not recommend doing depth of field in your layout because it just does not work with rendering. In terms of like the way that you set this up, it's gonna look completely different in a render. So I'll go over how to actually correctly set that up. But since this was a layout project I did, I just kind of tweaked these numbers until it looked right. Maya's viewport depth of field is very poor, so definitely don't use it for your layout playblasts. Anyways, let's get to playblasting this. Let's say I like how this looks now. So we're gonna see over here, it starts on frame, okay, might be fatal erroring. Nope, we're good. So it starts here on frame 18 and it goes all the way to frame 120, or at least the camera movement stops around 90. So I'm just gonna say frame 18 to frame 90. I'll click this window, go over to Windows, and then at the top of Windows, I'm not super sure why this Playblast button is under the window category, but it is. So I'll go to here and I'll press this little square box next to it. Actually, you know what? I messed up. You noticed how I clicked in this window before I Playblasted. If you have something selected and then you Playblast, it will actually show up selected in your Playblast. So that was a mistake. I'm going to deselect that so that way nothing is selected in this. Let's do that again. Windows, Playblast, and we can do start to end. So I'm going to say from frame 18 to frame 90. And then I'm going to scroll down. I usually turn up my quality to 100, turn my scale up to 1. And I'll do save to file. And this scene is called 020031. That's just a confusing naming convention that I use. But for now, I'm just going to call this Playblast. I'm going to put it onto my desktop. I'll press save. Awesome. And yeah, I think that's good. Sweet. So now I'll go ahead and I'll just press Playblast. And it's going to take some time. It might do something kind of weird where it puts your Playblast on another screen, but it should come out fine. The reason why I did click this screen over here before I did that was because whatever screen you click last, so whatever camera you work from last is what it'll Playblast from. So that's why, oh, well, it Playblasted, but let's see. Oh, I don't have my camera sharing on, or my screen sharing for you to see it. But if I went to my desktop and I looked at Playblast, you would see something called playblast.mov, and that's how you get it. And usually once I get that MOV file, I'll put it into media encoder and convert it from an MOV file into an MP4 file because those MOV files can be very large. So yeah, but that's basically how I get my scenes looking super nice, and then I Playblast, and then I'm done. So yeah.